Hello children, welcome back to the next session of the third prose, which is titled as The Collectors, and the second part we are going to learn today. And as we have learned that the children find their teachers in a condition as if drugged, and they find the behavior of Mr. and Mrs. Brown to be very strange, and the children get frightened, and Winnie tries to open the back door to get out from there, and he finds it locked. They try to open window. So what is happening here? Let's see. They were trying to close the door, but it doesn't quite shut. Petey comes back in and says, I think we need help. And Carol says, what did Mr. Hunt say? And Petey answers, nothing, he could not. Winnie is surprised, could not? Petey says, I went quietly, I was a bit scared. The door of the other room was partly open. I saw Mr. Hunt first, sitting there, not moving, staring at nothing. And Glenn says, you mean he was thinking about something? He was tired? Petey answers, no, I do not. He was drugged. Miss Van and Mrs. Jonas are the same. I crept a bit closer. Then I could see them too. They were sitting there blank as if they would be turned to stone. Carol asked, and Mr. and Mrs. Brown? Petey answered, they were looking at them and I don't know talking. Carol asked, what were they saying? Petey answers, no idea. They were not really talking. It sounded they were just sort of hissing and clicking at each other. Tracy asked, I want to get out of here. And Winnie also says, I am getting out right now. And he goes to the back door and tries to open it. And they see that it is locked. There is no key. And let me try, says Don. No, it is just won't open. And Glenn says, how about the window? Winnie tries the window. And Winnie says, no chance, it won't move. Tracy says, smash the glasses. We have got to get out. Carol says, here, try Mr. Hunt's walking stick. Use that, Winnie. Winnie tries to break the glass with the stick. Winnie says, it won't break. He hits the glass again. It just bounces off. Let me try, says Glenn. And he takes the walking stick and uses it. It's no use. That glass is like steel. Petey says, come on. We'll see if there's a way out through the front. And they begin to crowd towards the kitchen door when Mrs. Brown comes in with a tray of drinks. Mrs. Brown says, good heavens, what's all this row? What on earth have you children been doing? We want to leave, says Carol. Mrs. Brown convinced, in this form, how can you? Petey says, what have you done to Mr. Hunt and the others? Mrs. Brown says, done? Nothing. We have been having a cup of tea. Carol says, Petey says, you have drugged them. Mrs. Brown says, nonsense. Where in the world did you get that idea? She notices the cupboard left partly open. I do wish you would have the courtesy not to interfere with these cupboards. Glenn says, what is that stuff in there? Mrs. Brown responded, what do you mean stuff? It is electronic equipment. It belongs to my husband. He is a scientist. It's a part of his work. Petey says, and why is the back door locked? Mrs. Brown answered, it always locks when you close it. It is a burglar-proof lock. The windows are burglar-proof too. My husband doesn't want to run the risk of having any expensive equipment stolen. And Tracy says, they have been trying to scare us saying there was something strange about this house and about you. Mrs. Brown says, "How dare you? After we have taken you in and looked after you, after I have gone through the trouble of getting these drinks for you, the least you can do is to sit quietly and drink them." Kitty says, "I bet they are drugged, just like the tea you gave Mr. Hunt and the others." Mrs. Brown says, "Now just stop that kind of talk." Kitty says, "I saw them. You have got them in the other room drugged." "You saw nothing of the sort. They are all chatting to Mr. Brown right now," says Mrs. Brown. And Carol asked, "Ask them to come in here then, so we can see them." Mrs. Brown convinced them, "Certainly not. I am not dragging them in here just because of a lot of children's silly fantasies." "Well, let us go in there and see them," said by Glen. Mrs. Brown says, "No, you don't. I am not going to be ordered about by children." She bars the way through the door. And Carol says, "She can't stop us on her own if we all try to go." Mrs. Brown says, all right. I'll go and fetch one of your teacher's stupid children." She goes out and says, "See, she's going to bring them," said by Don. Tracy says, "They are not drugged at all. You were trying to scare us." And Don says, "You're stupid, Kitty. It is an ordinary house and they are ordinary people," says Tracy. And Don says, "Frightening us like that, you're rotten. I know what I saw. Give us that walking stick, Glen." "Here are you," says Glen. As Glen gives Kitty the stick, both Mr. and Mrs. Brown come in. "Where is Mr. Hunt?" asked Carol. And Mr. Brown answered, "He won't be coming, and you had better drink." Don't anybody touch that stuff," says Kitty. Mr. Brown replied, "It will make no difference. You can't escape anyway." "Oh, no. Come on, Glen. Let's get past them," says Winnie. And Glen says, "Right." He and Winnie make a rush for the door. One-armed Mrs. Brown brushes them away, and they are sent flying across the kitchen. Mr. Brown says, "Stop that. We don't want any of you damaged, and either one of us alone is more than a match for any 5 feeble earth children." And Carol says, "If you try to keep us here, the police will come looking for us." "Will they?" asked Mr. Brown. "They won't find you. You are going away." Tracy says, "No. Where are you taking us?" "Shall I tell them?" says Mrs. Brown. "Mr. Brown, why not? It might calm them to know there's no avoiding their fate." And Mrs. Brown says, "We are taking you to our home planet." And Glen asked, surprisingly, "Home planet?" Carol answers, "You are not from Earth. You are aliens." "Exactly," said Mr. Brown. And Winnie says, "But you're human. You look human." Mrs. Brown says, "We can take on any shape we wish for a time. So can our spaceship." Mr. Brown says, "At that moment, as you have seen, it looks like an earth house, very useful for our mission." Mrs. Brown answered, "In a few moments, we shall convert it to a spaceship again and return to our normal shape." "So you had better drink," says Mr. Brown. "It will make the shock of takeoff easier for you." "But you must not take us. You can't," says Tracy. And Mr. Brown says, "How wrong you are." Winnie answers, "But why us? Why pick on us?" Mrs. Brown answers, "You were available. We collect creatures from other worlds like you." "Why? What for?" asked Carol. Mr. Brown answers, "For experiment and scientific study. You will be useful to us." "Oh, no, we won't." And flinging the cupboard door open, Petey holds up the walking stick two-handed, says, "Come one step nearer and I smash this equipment." And Mr. Brown says, "No." Mrs. Brown says, "Do nothing yet. Too dangerous." "Grab your chair, Glenn, and come over here," says Petey. "If they so much as move, smash all this." Glenn says, "Right." And he joins Petey with the chair raised and ready. And Mr. Brown says, "Smash any parts of those panels and you can kill us all." "I'll take that chance," says Petey. "Carol, you and the rest get near that outer door." And Carol says, "Yes, come on, you lot, quick." All the children except Petey and Glenn cluster against the door to the outside. And Mr. Brown says, "They are only children. We can rush them, attack." And Mrs. Brown answers, "No, they are wild. Keep still." And again Mr. Brown is saying, "We can't let this happen. Beaten by inferior creatures. We must, if they break any part of that equipment, we are stranded here on earth. We can do no repairs here," says Mrs. Brown. And again Petey says, "You go and bring Mr. Hunt and the others out here." Mr. Brown replied, "No." And Petey taps the panel with the stick and swings it back for a real blow. Mrs. Brown says, Go and fetch them." Mr. Brown goes out and Petey says, How do we open the back door and the door in the porch?" Mrs. Brown says, "Yes, all right. It's that control down there on the left. It's marked with yellow light. Press it." And Glenn says, "Don't trust her, Petey." And Petey also replied, "I won't. Listen, if those doors don't open at once, Glenn and I start rocking." And Mrs. Brown says, "I'm telling the truth. Press the control. Press it." Petey says, "Watch her, Glenn. And if this is a trick, use that chair." And Glenn also responding, "Don't you worry, mate." Petey presses the control and the doors open. Carol says, "It's all right, Petey. It worked." Mr. Hunt, Miss Swan and Mrs. Jonas stagger dazedly into the room. Mr. Brown is behind them. And Petey says, "Help them. Get them outside and well away from the house." And Winnie asked, "What about you?" Petey says, "Don't worry. Get going." The children helped the adults out through the back door, leaving Petey and Glenn facing Mr. and Mrs. Brown. Here, Mrs. Brown appears there to tries to convince them that everything is normal when they did not trust her words and try to escape from there. She brushes them away into the kitchen, and Mrs. Brown announces that they are aliens and the children and their teachers would be taken to space for conducting experiment and scientific study on them. All the children tried to break the equipments kept in the cupboard, except Petey and Glenn clustered against the door to the outside to escape. Continuation will be learned in the next session. Thank you. Have a nice day.